Hello there guys and welcome back. You might be wondering why I'm responding to an unlisted video, but I do have a couple of reasons. First off, not only are the defenses garbage, but I do have a bit of a score to settle with Nier, considering the last time we debated on the matter over a year ago, and some stuff he and his cronies said during that debate. But don't think I'm only doing this out of some vendetta, since I do believe these defenses need to be debunked. And what better time than now, since Season 2 is upon us. I will cut several parts of this video out, either because it's not worth responding to, or it'll just be redundant. Without further ado, let's get straight into this.
To start off, let's look at two characters really quickly, Mr. House and Frederick Sinclair. In New Vegas, House is portrayed as an altruist. His goal is the continuation of the human species, including getting humanity into space and colonizing other planets.
Give me 20 years, and I'll reignite the high technology development sectors. 50 years, and I'll have people in orbit. 100 years, and my colony ships will be heading for the stars to search for planets unpolluted by the wrath and folly of a bygone generation.
This show turns this line into a lie, which is a retcon. Rather than being something he genuinely wants, it's now a lie that he's selling you, because this does not align with his portrayal in the show.
Okay, I really didn't think I would have to point this out to a diehard New Vegas fan of all people, but you somehow missed the point of Mr. House's character entirely. Mr. House is not an altruist in the slightest. He is a multi-billionaire, smooth-talking businessman that wants to achieve his own goals. You cannot sit there and tell me that Mr. House was telling the absolute truth to a completely random courier in New Vegas. Saying that this is a retcon is stupid, because you don't know Mr. House's ulterior motives behind the scenes, so if anything, it makes a lot of sense that Mr. House was portrayed the way he was in the TV show.
This isn't a one-off thing either. He repeatedly mentions saving mankind.
What I'm offering you is a ground floor opportunity in the most important enterprise on Earth. What I'm offering is a future. For you, and for what remains of the human race. You have a very bright future ahead of you. Thanks to your actions today, so does the rest of mankind.
Here's the thing about Mr. House. He's obviously a visionary of sorts, but he's not an altruist. When he says things like, you have a bright future ahead of you, or this is for the betterment of mankind, that's him smooth-talking you. He doesn't really care what happens to you so long as Mr. House gets what he wants, because Mr. House cares about New Vegas, not the whole wide world.
During a Vault-Tec meeting, they proposed the idea to House and the other CEOs that are there that they can win the game of capitalism by nuking the entire planet to destroy the competition, which is such an absurdly stupid and nonsense concept that I have to resist breaking it down here. But when hearing this plan, House says this.
It's a fun idea. There's a lot of earning potential with the end of the world. But we're talking about making a significant investment based on a hypothetical. How can you guarantee results?
There's the implication that he's on board with this plan, but worse yet, it's established that he knows this is Vault-Tec's plan. So if he knows Vault-Tec is behind the bombs, then why does he say this in New Vegas?
By 2065, I deemed it a mathematical certainty that an atomic war would devastate the Earth within 15 years. Every projection I ran confirmed it. I knew I couldn't save the world, nor did I care to, but I could save Vegas, and in the process, perhaps save mankind. I set to work immediately. I thought I had plenty of time to prepare. As it turned out, I was 20 hours short.
Yeah, he says all of that in the meeting because he means business. It makes sense that Mr. House would want to side with Vault-Tec if he predicted that the bombs were going to be dropped and wanted to profit off of it. Oh, and for a little funny, he also let this little bit of dialogue slip by, where he says, I knew I couldn't save the world, nor did I care to. Yeah, Mr. House is definitely an altruist, my guy.
For starters, I wouldn't say House is an altruist myself, something that Cree corrected in his main video talking about the show, but what you've shown is that you don't understand him either. You say that he's a liar and a smooth talker in New Vegas. May I ask for a source?
That's a nice argument, Senator. Why don't you back it up with a source?
My source is that I made it the fuck up.
In all seriousness, nothing in the game ever supports the idea that House is a liar. In fact, the ending of the game clearly implies the opposite. He honors his deal with the Courier and proceeds to follow up on what he said earlier.
Vegas will be a shining jewel in the middle of the desert, an oasis of light, a beacon to show mankind the way to the stars. This is just the start, you see. This is where it all begins.
And so the courier who had cheated death in the cemetery outside Good Springs cheated death once again, and the Mojave Wasteland was forever changed. Mr. House's Securitron army took control of Hoover Dam and the Strip, pushing both the Legion and the exhausted NCR out of New Vegas. Mr. House continued to run New Vegas his way, a despotic vision of pre-war glory. The streets were orderly, efficient, cold. New Vegas continued to be the sole place in the wasteland where fortunes were won and lost in the blink of an eye. The Courier, fair and kind-hearted to those in the wasteland, ensured that Mr. House would keep New Vegas stable and secure for future generations. Mr. House afforded him every luxury at his disposal in the Lucky 38, out of gratitude and a quiet sense of pride for his choice in lieutenants.
I got some pushback for this in my last video, with someone pointing out to me that we don't know if his ending of the game is canon, but that's missing the point. Even if Season 2 does confirm that his ending isn't canon, that doesn't mean that his characterization isn't. That will not be in the game if that isn't what the devs intended for him, which Chris Avalon points out in his review of the show. Besides that, I'm not going off of speculation. In fact, that's what I've seen people use to defend the house of the show more than anything. People speculate that he simply tried to get information out of them and go behind their backs, but that's not portrayed in the show itself. He goes as far as to say there's a lot of earning potential with ending the world, and nothing implies that he's tried to get information out of them as a double agent. If the show wanted to imply this, House could ask questions like would they plan to drop the bomb and other pertinent information, but he doesn't. I addressed this in my comment, but since House knows for a fact that nuclear devastation is inevitable, he would have the platinum chip printed immediately and sent to him. He mentions that he had it printed on October 22nd and was set to be delivered to him the next day, implying that it only takes 1 day for it to be printed. And considering that Cooper was being forced to take odd jobs to pay for his alimony, it implies that House had weeks, if not months, to have the chip printed. Plus, if he isn't signed with Vault-Tec, why does he lie about his story and cover them? Why does he not expose them or even mention them as an inevitable threat in New Vegas? He has no reason to cover for them if that's the case. And the whole thing about Hank getting a nuke from Lonesome Road has no evidence whatsoever, and as I said, that's just headcanon without any evidence. And the fact that they assassinated another character in this very scene, that gives me no reason to believe they didn't do the same to House. To go back to what Nier said, House doesn't say this to a random courier. The courier is the one who's delivering the chip to him, so he's a very vital part to his plan, especially after being betrayed by Benny. Plus, House doesn't just divulge this to him immediately, he only does so after the courier gives the chip to him, proving his worth. And what he's saying is not sweet talk. House is a very pragmatic man, and as I've already discussed, nothing in the game proves or even implies that he's a dishonest or manipulative person. The burden of proof is on you to prove that he isn't, but you can't. He's more of a morally ambiguous capitalist, sure, but that doesn't mean that he's this cartoonishly greedy businessman either, nor does that excuse him from being character assassinated in this show. I've seen people in your comments compare him to Elon Musk, but they are not the same person. Not only is that a non sequitur, but it's a false equivalence. Just because Elon might have changed motivations, that doesn't excuse House changing for no reason. Just because people change in real life, that doesn't automatically mean characters can just change on a whim. That's just a lazy cop-out to try not even explain why the character changes in the narrative. And while I'm not a simp for rich people by any means, that doesn't mean that House is like every rich bad person who's ever lived. He is far more nuanced than that. But since this show has a very obvious anti-capitalist, pro-communist agenda, he, along with the other character we're talking about in a second, are utterly ruined. And from the looks from the trailers in Season 2, it doesn't look like they're going to fix him either. In fact, they're just going to ruin him further.
Moving on to Sinclair, there's less to say because he's a smaller character, but through Dead Money we learn that the Sierra Madre Casino and Resort is essentially a love letter to a singer and actress, Vera Keys. The whole project is extremely important to him, and if he were the CEO or even representative of the Big MT, there's no way in hell he would allow this place to be used as a testing ground. If anything, Sinclair himself is a victim of the Big MT and its unethical experiments.
I'm sorry, Sinclair is a victim of Big MT because of the experiments they made? Don't you know that Sinclair literally funded them to do that? The Big MT were one of his many companies. How is he a victim? Big MT is also associated with Vault-Tec, so it also makes sense that Sinclair was at that meeting. Considering the fact that Frederick Sinclair is the guy that set up traps for the sake of setting up traps, because he was obsessed with security measures, and he funded the Big MT, it's not outside the realm of possibility that Sinclair would allow the Sierra Madre to be used as a testing ground. And wouldn't you know it, he did allow it to be a testing ground, because that's how the Ghost People came to be, something that Sinclair and Big MT were involved in. Literally verbatim in the wiki, Sinclair gave them free rein to use the Sierra Madre as a giant testing ground for experimental technologies. Now, unbeknownst to Sinclair, some incidents did happen within these testing grounds, and the people that worked there were unknowingly just used as test subjects. However, that doesn't mean Sinclair didn't allow this to happen, and it doesn't mean he wouldn't suggest some sort of experiment like he did in the TV show. The ends justify the means. He didn't care what was going on behind the scenes, he only cared about getting what he wanted.
Somehow, you managed to misunderstand Sinclair more than you do House. Sinclair is described as being very kind-hearted and optimistic from everything we hear about him, whether from the notes, terminal entries, or even the characters such as Dean Domino. If you read some of the terminals from Old World Blues, they not only make it very clear that he was just a client, not an executive of the Big MT, which makes no sense why he represents them in the show, but whatever, but they make it very clear they didn't truly know what they were doing to the workers in the villa. In fact, the wiki entry you provided points out that they even hid an incident of the experiment from him. Maybe he actually did more research by actually, playing the game. Instead of wikis, you'll know this. Something Chris Avellone also hit the nail on the head with his very review. Man, that guy's just so based. Though granted, you try using wiki entries against me when we discussed the topic, like how the stim packs are these instant health regenerators in the show, even though if you look up the link to the source, it's from the Fallout 1 survival guide, and it describes it from a gameplay standpoint, not an in-universe one. I've never really taken them much as serious lore, much like all other healing items in pretty much every other video game, besides Dark Souls and Bioshock. They're just there for gameplay and that's about it. Heck, a friend even pointed out to me instances listed in the same wiki article itself of when it doesn't instantly heal a character's injuries or wounds. So nice to know that you can't even bother doing more than the bare minimum research on this topic. Hope that doesn't continue to bite you more in this video.
So first off, the fact that Rose, Lucy's mother, is a ghoul and was in Shady Sands when it was nuked, means that she's directly tied to the destruction of the city by being there when it happened.
No shit.
In episode 4, Lucy mentions the Plague of 77, in which people starved, her mother included.
In the Great Plague of 77, everyone had to quarantine, they couldn't work the farms together. People starved, my mother included.
This is the show outright telling us that Lucy's mother died in 2277. Now we know that isn't true as Rose is a ghoul, but Hank doesn't know that when he tells young child Lucy that her mother died.
You're assuming quite a lot here. You don't know that Hank wouldn't know about the mother's condition when it was established in the final episode that Hank was a liar. The Great Plague of 77 is something that Hank told Lucy. It's something that Lucy believes what actually happened, but the big reveal in episode 8 is that Hank is a liar. That's the point of the ghoul being revealed as Lucy's mother. Hank was the one that nuked Shady Sands, the place where her mother was, and also the place where Maximus was as a child. So the whole point of Lucy talking about the Great Plague of 77, along with a few other things in the plot, was to build up the twist at the end that Hank was the one behind it all.
Maybe Hank didn't nuke Shady Sands right away. Maybe he waited a few years before doing it. But why though? Based on what we know, there's no reason for him to arbitrarily wait. Worse yet, if he did wait 4 years for no particular reason, then we now need to explain why Rose doesn't go back to the vault to get her children back. We know she can do this because Moldaver uses Rose's Pip-Boy to get into Vault 32. She found a functioning surface city that is very safe, and an entire society and growing nation to be a part of. Why the fuck would she abandon her children to Hank and a life in the vault when she knows something shady is going on there?
First of all, Rose did not abandon her children. Hank went after Rose to get Lucy. It was established as such in the show. Lucy remembers when she was with her mother that she was out on an open field, not inside the virtual field that the vault has. It was from that point that Hank took Lucy from Rose before the nuke on Shady Sands happened. Nuking Shady Sands should have an obvious reason on why. If we decide to humor the question of why Hank would wait a few years to nuke Shady Sands is the heart and symbol of the NCR. If Hank would find out that a place like Shady Sands was being rebuilt and rehabilitated by people after it was suffering a fall, that's competition for Vault-Tec. So no shit, Hank is going to nuke Shady Sands because the NCR is Vault-Tec's competition.
You might have noticed I skipped a pretty big part of the video surrounding the date of Shady Sands being nuked and the chalkboard scene, but honestly, I don't feel like reiterating that again, because I have a bigger smoking gun to shut this argument down. All that you've done is simply explain why Hank should nuke Shady Sands. That doesn't explain why he would wait up to 6 years from what I've gathered from the script of the first episode that was released. Because that is a massive deal. Why wait 4 to 6 years to nuke the city with Rose? Since the potential consequences could be disastrous for him. If she were ever to return during that period of time, she would expose Hank as being a liar, both for the fact that there is civilization on the surface and the fact that she's even alive. Hank would instantly lose the trust of the Vault, and they would inevitably leave or investigate further to Hank, potentially leading them to discover the truth behind Vault 31. If Hank is actually smart, he will nuke Shady Sands as soon as possible to avoid this from happening. But of course, the problem with that is if he did, that would render New Vegas non-canon, and you and anyone else who offends this show can't have that. And Rose essentially did just abandon her children if we go with this narrative that the nuking didn't happen until after New Vegas, because while yes, Hank did retrieve them, Rose just left the kids with Hank for years when he's now been proven to her eyes as a liar, since he tried to prevent her from leaving the vault and joining Shady Sands because he's claimed there's no civilization. That is vehemently out of character for what little we know about her, because she is described as being caring and loving about her children. And no respectable mother will allow them to just stay with Hank for years without rescuing them, as well as the rest of the vault. This is the entire problem of those who claim that nuking took place after New Vegas. If we're to accept that, either it makes the actions of either Hank or Rose stupid and out of character. If we go with the idea that the events happened in 2281 through 83, what does Hank benefit from lying about when Rose died? Why lie that a famine that killed her and others in the vault took place years prior? People would have inevitably called that out as being a bald-faced lie, since they will remember that never happened. And before I get some inevitable counter that they're under propaganda, that's not how that works. That doesn't instantly mean they just would accept something that objectively did not happen that they could easily remember. It would be one thing if the event took place decades or even centuries prior, but that is not the case. In your comment to that one guy who made a good point about how nonsensical that is, you, much like all the other defenders of this show, have to resort to headcanon to explain it. Besides, that propaganda must be pretty weak if Norm and Lucy can break free of it as easily as they do. Even though they love their father more than anyone else at the start of the show, especially when Lucy, out of nowhere, remembers Shady Sands that her father mind-tricked her into somehow forgetting when he claimed it was only the fault projector, when Moldaver tells her what actually happened, and she just instantly believes her with no need for evidence. And considering that she looks like 5 or 6 in the flashback, she should be old enough to remember the vault door opening, the time she spent with her mother, and the time she spent in Shady Sands. It makes even less sense for her to trust Moldaver, when she kept her mother alive as a feral ghoul in a miserable existence, and murdered innocent people in the first episode when she didn't need to. All she needed to do was use the Pip-Boy to get inside 31, when she used this to get inside 32, and take hostages and demand that Hank show himself, forcing him to either give himself up or make himself look bad in the eyes of the vault. It doesn't make sense that they need him to unlock the cold fusion when all he does is punch in a code, something they could have done themselves by just hacking it, or even building a machine to not require that, since for some reason they need someone from Vault-Tec to unlock it, even though Moldaver invented it and built it. Or how it manages to power a city that's been nuked and should have no functioning source of power. Who knows, it's almost as if the show is pretty badly written or something, I don't know.
None of the NCR remnants, nor the members in the vault know it was Vault-Tec that nuked Shady Sands, despite the fact that they all either follow or literally worship Moldaver, and she knows that Vault-Tec was behind it. Why the fuck wouldn't she tell them, besides to save the reveal for the audience.
You say this as if Moldaver supposedly knows about the existence of this particular vault and the fact they worship her. It was never established in the show that she knows of this vault, otherwise I don't think those vault dwellers would still be there if she would have told them about Hank's plan.
No, that's actually a good point. First off, Vault 4 is right outside the city in plain sight, and it's confirmed in the show that Moldaver helped evacuate the survivors of Shady Sands, so she must know about the vault, since that must be where she must evacuate them to. And since she somehow knows Hank's origin, that he nuked Shady Sands, which is never explained, she should tell them that it was Hank. Plus, if Vault 4 is right next to the city, why not use a GEC to rebuild it? GECs canonically use cold fusion, so that could be insanely useful for her goals, but the show just kind of ignores that too.
There's also the whole lack of any NCR presence in the show, except the cultists in the vault and Moldaver's remnants, the latter of which are wiped out by the end.
No, the people in Vault 4 are just the survivors of Shady Sands. Wording it as if they were part of the NCR is finicky because it's mostly referred to the military force. Those are just civilians from Shady Sands that happen to worship Moldaver.
Are you actually serious right now? The NCR is a republic. A republic! Which is a government whose supreme power is held by the people who vote for elected officials or officers. Look it up on the Merriam-Webster dictionary.
Cause hot damn, you wanna know what's a scam? Your education. That's what the scam is.
In Fallout 2, we even see the NCR pamphlet provided by Tandy that they have over 700,000 citizens, which is 40 years prior to New Vegas, and they have much territory under their control for multiple states. You try to argue against this, but they are a superpower, especially by the standards of the Fallout world. So, no duh that the refugees of Vault 4 were citizens of the NCR because they lived in its capital. Nice to know you don't know how governments work.
Speaking of Shady Sands, it's also in a new location. I don't know how they managed to fuck this up, but the city is now in the middle of LA, and not only that, but the newly invented Vault 4 is within walking distance of the now destroyed city, as Lucy and Maximus gaze over the Shady Sands crater and walk to a medical facility to get trapped in Vault 4 within the same day. Some people might write this off as pedantic, but this is anything but. Changing the location of Shady Sands has massive implications. In the original Fallout, it was right between Vaults 13 and 15. It was a northern town and relatively secluded. In LA there is the Boneyard. Now Shady Sands is where the Boneyard should be, and this changes everything because Shady Sands would have developed differently if it were all the way in the city. Are Vaults 13 and 15 moved too? Because the Master Chef cracked them open first. It was his entire motivation and goal to get pure humans to turn into his master race of highly intelligent super mutants.
I'm not even gonna humor what he's saying about the Master because, you know, the Master is fucking dead. What he says about the Master is completely irrelevant to the conversation if he no longer exists. But since he's talking about Shady Sands changing its location, he's using the map from Fallout 1. Are we just gonna ignore the fact that Fallout 2 also changed the location of Shady Sands? Fallout 2 depicted Shady Sands and the vaults nearby it further northwest than in Fallout 1. I want to hammer this in because Kretosis likes to paint it like Bethesda are at fault for these retcons, when it's not a Bethesda problem, it's a Fallout problem. Retcons have existed since Fallout 2, even New Vegas is not safe from this either. New Vegas has retcons as well, yet they're never brought into question for breaking the world of Fallout.
Oh man, this is the big one. This argument right here is the main reason I want to respond to this video. You've just exposed yourself big time for this. To start, the Master being dead does not counter the fact that he should have cracked the vaults when he was alive. Him being dead does not change any of that. Only does this make him look like the world's biggest cretin when he's supposed to be one of the smartest characters in the franchise, but it also impacts the plot of the show itself, because if he did crack those vaults, then the plot of the show never happens. It also breaks the plot of the first game, because he should be able to find Vault 13 without any help from the Vault Dweller, and take the residents of Vault 15 before they form the NCR, an important fact to be used for later. And what you mentioned about Fallout 2 is not only a massive whataboutism, but it's also a complete false equivalent. Are you really so dense you can't see the night and day difference between the two of them? One's a very slight location change that's just a nitpick, and the other is a massive 400-mile change that overrides another location from the canon entirely, and breaks the plot of both the original game and the show. As I've explained in my Fallout Misconceptions video, this is not selective outrage as you claim. There's a reason why one is criticized more than the other. It's like saying Luke's kick not connecting is the same as a disappearing knife. They're not equivalent. One is blatantly more of a problem than the other. Is the other thing worth a criticism? Sure, but that doesn't mean the more dramatic problem is okay or can be ignored. The last time we spoke, you also repeated the same argument that Fallout's lore has always been completely inconsistent since 2 to try and excuse the lore changes and retcons in this show. Not only do you never provide any more examples to substantiate this beyond your pathetic Cope example, it's not even true to begin with. Any issues that 2 or even New Vegas have with the lore are far fewer and less damaging than in the show or the Bethesda games. That's why people like to be far more critical of Bethesda for doing this, because they've made it clear, both for their games or even statements from them, that they don't care about the lore or being consistent with it. And before you bring up the Interplay spin-offs, I've addressed those too in the misconceptions video. Either they're also issues if they're meant to be canon, or they're not if they weren't meant to be. It's hard to tell what the intention was back then, but at most they're just semi-canon to the series to not even canon at all. It's just because they are made by Interplay, that doesn't mean they were made by the original creators. There is a difference, but Bethesda and their version of Fallout has done far more damage to the lore than what's came before. And here's another thing, even if Fallout 2 did completely screw up the lore, that supports my argument more than anything that this show should have not been canon, but rather its own adaptation. I know you're one of those people who claim that this show needed to be canon because of the Halo show, and the creators of that show made it non-canon just to ignore the lore, but that is honestly better. Not only nowadays we have so many examples of media ignoring the lore or prior stories and ruining what came before despite being canon, and this show is no different than any of them. You claim you don't care as long as it doesn't break the lore to the point of absurdity, but I fail to see how assassinating multiple characters, massive location changes, breaking the timeline, radical changes in factions, destroying factions off screen, or even changing the entire inciting incident to one of the dumbest plot points I've ever seen doesn't break that point. This show does far too much damage to the lore even if it were good on its own, but it's not even good on its own merits as well. I've talked about it some as well as others, and I'll even link a doc that discusses the issues this show has, which were contributed by me and friends of mine. This show is truly the worst of both worlds, and being made non-canon isn't what made the Halo show bad. Who do you think would make a better Halo adaptation? Stephen Kane, the guy who hasn't made anything noteworthy since about a decade before the first season came out? Or Steven Spielberg, Guillermo del Toro, or Peter Jackson? People who have made several fantastic movies and have actual talent. Heck, the Peter Jackson Halo movie got scrapped and turned into District 9, a genuinely great movie. If those people made the Halo movie, chances are it could have been pretty good as well. Being canon isn't the be-all end-all to quality, talent is. And nowadays, we have examples of video game adaptations that are great and eviscerate this show in terms of quality. They're either canon or non-canon, so either approach can work depending on talent and understanding the source material. So this cope that the show needs to be canon in order to be good to avoid another Halo show is nothing more than a pathetic cope to justify the show breaking lore. But considering that you don't even know what a retcon is, or don't seem to understand that some canon do prior stories, even if it's not a direct continuation to what came before, does explain why you defend the show as much as you do.
First of all, you can't undo a story when it's being told in future events. We don't even know what's going on within places like New Vegas or what's happened to most of the other important characters in that story. Most of the stuff we've seen in regards to things like New Vegas and Shady Sands have taken place after the events of Fallout 4. That's not a retcon, that's just a change you don't like.
Are you retarded? That's not... You can still retcon things in future material that retcon things.
I never denied retcons being a thing.
Yeah, so if you want to explain the whole wording and argument there.
So the whole point I was trying to make wasn't that retcons cannot be a thing in the Fallout TV show. The whole point was the Fallout TV show was completely astraying from whatever contents the video games had. Like, it's doing its own story, but it has elements of the games that are there. You just don't know what happened ever since the games happened. It's an entirely new thing in the timeline.
This speaks to a level of ignorance and shows that you simply don't know what you're talking about, either when it comes to Fallout's lore or retconning. He goes on to attempt to defend Vault-Tec and their plan of nuking the world to win at the game of capitalism. I'm not going to go too much on this, since I already talked about a lot in depth back last year when I made my 2 lore videos, but I'll just highlight or mention a couple of parts worth discussing, just be as thorough as I'm willing, since I think I've already made my case pretty clear that he has no idea what he's talking about. Though the link to this video will be in the description for the curious. He claims that it's ambiguous or whether or not Vault-Tec actually dropped the bombs.
To summarize Vault-Tec's amazing plan, they invited their biggest competitors to a meeting to plan on how to eliminate the competition in order to win the game of capitalism, and to do so they decided to nuke the entire planet, and while doing that, they made vaults so people could survive and gave them technology so they could rebuild in the post-apocalypse and become competition for them to then nuke again.
To be fair, it was never established that Vault-Tec was the one that dropped the nukes. It's left ambiguous as to who dropped the bombs first. We know that Vault-Tec wanted the world to end and that nuking the world was a suggestion, but that doesn't mean they were behind the bombs dropping. That is something that was never revealed.
But that's not true, since the show not only ever directly mentions China by name, even during the pre-war sections of the show, but it's only ever reinforced in the show itself that it was Vault-Tec. With both Hank nuking the NCR, even though it's not explained how he got a nuke, not sure why a corporation would be allowed to have nukes pre-war, but anyway, both Moldaver and Bud claimed that it was Vault-Tec who started the war. Cree rightly mentions how it makes no sense why they think they would gain any profit when there are no customers left, when Nier tries to claim that's what the vaults are for, even though not only did the experiments kill many of those that were in the vaults, begging the question why they use such dangerous and fatal experiments, lowering their customer base even more than what it already is. But there's nothing gained from nuclear holocaust since there's no resources or infrastructure anymore. And Vault-Tec in the show is clearly depicted as being the wealthiest country in the world anyway. Cree also talks about how it makes no sense for them to nuke their own societies, like the NCR, only for Nier to claim that makes no sense. Even though that does happen because the NCR, as mentioned, came from Vault 15, and through the GEG, the people built Shady Sands, which goes on to be the founding place of the capital of the NCR. So Vault-Tec giving them the GEX to allow them to become a superpower, only to nuke them for being competition, as Moldaver explains. That is completely counterintuitive and self-defeating, since all they're doing is reducing more of the world's resources and nuking the people they sheltered in the first place. Plus, what about factions that didn't come from Vaults, like the Enclave, Legion, Super Mutants, or the Brotherhood of Steel? They won't care about any wealth they may have and would inevitably fight against them, whether individually or through temporary alliances. And if your counter is going to be just to nuke them, for one, not only would I imagine that Vault-Tec not have that many nukes left, if any at this point, but even if they did, are they just going to keep doing this until all resources are gone and there's nothing left? That doesn't seem like a very fruitful plan to me. The factions exist in the first place because of being allowed to grow because of time. Even though Bud claims that time will be the apex predator that will eliminate those not in the vaults, and the entire franchise itself proves the opposite. Especially since the Enclave should be able to monitor their activities, since they can do that through Project Safe House, which monitors every vault, but the show conveniently ignores that too. So much for the show being canon is good, huh? But there is one more thing I'd like to highlight before we're done.
This is what the last remaining bit of Fallout worth a damn has been ruined, destroyed, and retconned over. Oh, and the worst part? The show writers have come out and said they nuked Shady Sands because they wanted to keep a post-apocalypse feel to the show. They destroyed the single biggest faction in the franchise, and all the storytelling potential it had, because they were too fucking stupid to set the show in any part of the USA that hasn't been seen or mentioned in the games at all yet.
The show writers are stupid for progressing the timeline of Fallout to keep the post-apocalyptic feel? Do you just not want the world to change? Do you expect every single installation of Fallout to have the exact same world with nothing drastically changing it? Shady Sands getting nuked doesn't mean the NCR is just gone either. You literally see remnants of the NCR in the fucking show. This would be like the equivalent of bitching about one of the Halo rings or Reach in Halo being destroyed, or complaining about Cadia being destroyed in Warhammer. It's fucking ridiculous. This is just a cope argument because he literally just doesn't want a story or a world to progress. Better be careful, Kree. Next thing you know, you're gonna start sounding like you never played any of the games.
Ironic.
This is so ironic coming from a Bethesda fan, because that's what they always do. Like in Fallout 3 and 4, where the world has been stagnant for 200 plus years, even though it makes no sense, especially in 3, the reasoning as to why is to provide it in-game, and in 4, it makes no sense for the Institute to do that, since they're literally making themselves the enemy of the Commonwealth, even though they just won't be left in peace. Though considering how terribly written they are in the game, that should be a surprise. And this show continues that trend in the worst way possible. Fallout is about rebuilding, growth and change. In the classics and New Vegas, things always change and grow in ways that make sense. But this show undoes all of that in one fell swoop, and now basically everything that has happened has been for nothing. Could you destroy the NCR? Sure, but it has to be a way that makes sense and it can be used for more story potential, but the show doesn't do that. It undoes everything that has happened to West Coast, just so that way it can be nothing more than Super Mutants, the Brotherhood of Steel, and the Enclave running the show again, like how it's been since Fallout 3. It's not like Mad Max, The Walking Dead, or The Last of Us, where it's only been 20 years max since the apocalypse, if not right after. It's been 200 years now, but nothing Bethesda's Fallout ever truly changes, and just because it's a post-apocalypse doesn't mean that nothing can change or that you can't keep the feel of it even when things are rebuilding. New Vegas managed to pull that off amazingly. It's like saying it's not Star Wars because it doesn't have the Force, or the Empire versus Rebellion, when we've had examples that show that doesn't have to be the case. But this show, much like the Star Wars sequel trilogy, undoes the previous story so it can maintain the same status quo. No matter what happens, nothing ever truly significant to ever manifest. And this is why this show doesn't deserve to be canon. In fact, the Bethesda games don't deserve to be canon. I know you're going to claim that as childish, or that I'm not a true Fallout fan for not liking the show or Bethesda, something that Nier and his cronies have actually said to me, by the way. But the classics and New Vegas are far better than anything Bethesda or Amazon can hope to make in this franchise. And there's a reason that the good Fallouts will always be more beloved than the trash. I know you're going to claim Bethesda made their franchise more popular, like what you've told me before, but I debunked that in my misconceptions video, which was made in response to stuff you said to me. But the fact that these misconceptions spread because of people like you proves to be why Bethesda is unfit for this franchise, or at least Todd Howard and Emil Pagarillo. And honestly, after the seeing of quality of your argumentation from this video, and how you do everything in the book to defend them, this shows me how much of a fanboy and a shill you are for them, and I don't have any qualms saying that. This video is garbage in every way. I'm not remotely convinced that the show is well written at all. I'm going to make another lore video on Season 2, because it is going to suck and ruin New Vegas, and the last bastion of Fallout will be destroyed because of it. I'm still going to make more Fallout videos, but I'm down I'm going to watch or cover any subsequent seasons afterwards, because after Season 2, I'm done. I'm finished with the show as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, that's all for now. This is Skids, signing off.